Welcome to another episode of Mystic Skeptic Raiders of the Unknown. Today we have Kelly Maden on our show. He's an Anglican priest, and we came across each other during. He wrote a post about the way that Charlie Kirk was memorialized by his people, and some of the progressive organizations were criticizing the way they went about it. Can you tell us about that first post, and then we can talk about Christian patriotism and other subjects that are of interest to you?
Right. I didn't actually go back and read the post. I should have. I forgot that was the initial thing that brought us together. But as I recall, there was a lot of patriotism involved in Charlie Kirk's funeral, and some groups really objected to that because it was a Christian ceremony as well. I think that the biggest thing to say there is that Charlie Kirk was very active in politics, and he mixed his faith and his politics a lot. And so probably much more than I do, but that's who he was, and so I think it reflected his who he was. I didn't watch the whole funeral, but I thought that the various expressions of various people, it was in some ways a political event because he was such a popular political figure as well. So yeah, I don't know if there was something more specific than that, but I'd have to get into the particulars of that. I'm sorry,
Well,
I didn't
I want to tell you
figure
about
it
my
out.
theory, and it's kind of like
Yeah.
a messed up thing to do. In my culture, and I'm sure in American culture is the same thing. You're not supposed to speak ill of the departed,
Right.
but it is very telling that there is a debate between him and a progressive activist from 2018, and Charlie Kirk never mentions God, spirituality, or Christianity in any way. He just goes directly into um, policy.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you came across how he turned from being someone who was talking about taxes, immigration, and political stuff related to the Trump administration, and then suddenly he went full evangelical and almost like Dominion Christian in his approach. And to me, it feels very scripted and very like he had handlers or someone like that that told him. This is the thing that sticks. This is the thing that maybe the community needs to get them riled up during the elections. Are you able to spot someone who is genuine or not in their faith based on your experience as a minister?
Well, you know people by the fruits of their lives. I came across Charlie very late, only a few months before his death, as people were criticizing him, and I assumed that they were right because much of the criticism directed towards Christians in politics can be accurate. It's such a big movement, such a big Christianity is encompasses 2 billion people on the planet, and so you see all kinds of things. Charlie came across to me, however, as very sincere in his faith and very sincere in what he believed, and he had a habit of ranking those, and he always put his faith in Christ first, and that was above everything else. So, you know, I'd have to get closer to him than I was, but the more I dug, the more impressed I was with the sincerity of his beliefs. And he was a young man. You have to say that as well. He he um, he didn't he was, I think, surprisingly mature for a 30-year-old man.
And we've had multiple shows, and you heard the one with the other Anglican priest about Christian nationalism and
Hmm.
the way that the Seven Mountains and all that stuff going down. As a member of a traditionalist church that holds to, I guess, traditional values, do you think that their approach is helpful, or is it almost like medieval Catholicism, where they think that somehow they're gonna bring about a Christian kingdom, and then Jesus is gonna appear and high five them and tell them good job for dominating the whole world on their reign.
Right.
Do you think that that is the right approach? Because we've had some evangelical ministers say that uh, Jesus' kingdom is not of this world, that it's supposed to be a spiritual communal thing, and that when you have entanglements with the government, it's very easy to become corrupt and become what they often despise, which is some type of theocratic system like the one that progressives claim exists in Israel and what a lot of us know exists in the Middle East through the different caliphates and things like that.
Right. Um, well, it's a very broad question. I'll do the best I can. I do the Seven Mountains approach is very it has a long lineage of how it came about, and to see what it actually means, you have to drill down into who's advocating for what. Um, Christians believe that Jesus is Lord. That is the first creed of the church. Before there was an Apostles' Creed or a Nicene Creed, that was the first creed. Jesus is Lord. And that's a political statement, meaning that he is sovereign over all things. But what does that look like? How does that work itself out? Well, the best system I have seen, the one least likely to run into problems, is the kind that we have in the United States with guaranteed freedoms, including religion, including uh, views that don't agree with Christianity, including freedom of speech, all the rights that are guaranteed in the Bill of Rights and subsequent amendments to the Constitution, plus democratic election of our representatives. That is the system that is least likely to cause problems. The ambition of the American founders was not to create the best system possible, it was to avoid the worst system possible. And so, what I think we have put into our Constitution, it's not perfect, we're still working on it after 250 years, is a system that avoids the worst, and including the worst of Christians trying to dominate other people. That's a real possibility, and we've seen it many times in history. So my position is that you want as much freedom as possible, and as much order as necessary, and allowing people to follow their convictions, and working it out. It's just politics is compromise. There's always compromise in a fallen world. We do not get what we want. Nobody gets precisely what we want, and so we have to compromise. We have to find ways of working together with people who disagree radically with what we believe. Um, so that's in very broad terms how I see politics from a Christian standpoint.
So in your article about Daniel Darlin's In Defense of Christian Patriotism, you say that patriotism has become a dirty word. It's often conflated with people who are either white supremacists or so gung-ho in their patriotism that they support all the military interventions around the world and things like that. But I see that the pendulum is swinging on one side to another, either uh, lack of patriotic sentiment or too much patriotic sentiment. What is a good balance? And does Darlin give us something that cannot be misconstrued or turned into some type of fascist, um, all white, all, you know, very narrow understanding of what patriotism is for Americans?
Right. In my review of Daniel Darling's In Defense of Patriotism, I mentioned that patriotism is an all-time low among young people in the United States. And that's really tragic because the Bible is very clear, and all of us uh, should recognize, whether they're Christians or not, that we owe a tremendous amount to our country, like we owe a tremendous amount to our family and our community, our school. All of these things have contributed so much to making us who we are today. Not without blemishes or without criticisms that can be made, but our country is the community in which we grew up, and we owe loyalty to it. We owe love to it to try and make it as good as possible. I think Daniel Darling does an excellent job in his book of always of making the case for the love of our country, for owing loyalty to our country, but also recognizing the faults that it has. That we had tremendous ideals in our founding, and it grieves me to see people attacking our founding so much as they have. And yet, of course, we even from our founding, we did not live up to those ideals. We there was even the slaveholding uh, signatories of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, leading up to the Constitution, that is, were recognized that slavery was wrong, and they could not come up with an ordered way of getting out of slavery, and because they delayed on that, we wound up seeing 500,000 people dead as a result of the Civil War. Almost 100 years later. So that's how I see it. There's always these caveats. We have a great country, but there are many flaws that we've had. We've seen grievous flaws in our country. We have been an example. Many countries have emulated our approach, but we have much to apologize to the rest of the world for as well, and so forth. That's my take.
So I'm going to quote two parts of the book that you show in your article. The first
Yeah.
one is healthy patriotism is not only an acceptable posture for a Christian, I believe it's a necessary posture for a Christian. And the second one is I'm writing this book for Christians who love America, who are afraid to express it for fear of being accused of idolatry. I'm writing this book for Christians who want to shape the life of their nation, but are constantly being told to leave their faith in church on Sunday. I'm writing this book for confused followers of Jesus wondering what it looks like for Christians to faithfully steward their God-given citizenship.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with the White Rose movement during Nazi Germany and Dietrich Bonhoeffer?
I am, but not in great detail. I'm more familiar with Bonhoeffer's story than I am with the larger movement of which he was a part.
So a lot of us are worried, especially at the beginning of the first Trump administration, when everybody, including the other Anglican priests, told me the reason that Christians support Trump is because he will give them a place in the table.
Mm,
And Christian values, Jewish traditional values, were being eroded by the other administrations. It was becoming too liberal and atheistic. A lot of things that we don't consider family friendly were being pushed.
mhm,
So we needed an advocate, and him picking Mike Pence kind of gave people comfort. So all my conservative Christian and Jewish friends voted for Trump.
mhm,
And I kept on saying that it was a hoax and that it was, throwing bones at them just to get their support and then leaving them hanging as, he didn't want to relieve power the second time around, and the third time around he came back. I see a lot of these worries coming true.
mhm,
But when you think about what the Nazis, and not to make a one-to-one correlation, did, they told all the churches, including the Catholic Church and the Lutherans, as long as you don't oppose us, you guys are cool. But here's a Nazi flag that I need you to put on the altar. So everybody gets the hint. And the only people that I know of who stood up against him was Bonhoeffer and his friends, and they ended up getting trampled. And then some Catholics got trampled for supporting Jews or standing up as well. And then everybody, that famous quote, they came after everyone, including the Christians at the end.
mhm.
Uh, Do you think that getting too cozy with government could lead to a similar situation where people assume that the government is going to protect them, and the same thing they complain about, where they become a protected group, like other groups were protected by the progressives,
Mhm.
now has given a chance for the faith to be distorted and to be made into this all-American project that loses the conscience of America, and loses the ability for the church to be able to uh, hold the powerful accountable and to teach them godly ways versus just being wrapped up in the power and the money that comes from government and these now it seems like the cult of personality that has taken over American government.
Right. Well, yes, I'm very uncomfortable with some of the attitudes that I see Christians have towards Trump. But I did vote for Trump this last time. It was for the first time I voted for him in 2024. I did not vote for him the two other times. I didn't vote Democratic on the Democrat side, but I wrote in another option. So it was a very difficult decision for me, but I felt uh, that there was a right decision, and I made it that way. In our system, there's really only two options. You can vote third party, or you can do what I did the two previous elections and write in a name, which is just a sign. Um, but it's going to come down to one of the two, and therefore, my biggest concern was the option that we had. I did not like the option that we had. Kamala Harris was the most progressive candidate that the Democratic Party had ever put forward, on the basis of her voting record in Congress, and the rest of her involvement in political life. And so, yeah, it was as much as anything saying I'm going to vote for Trump because I don't like the other option. We come down to the least bad option, I think, is too often in politics and in life. So, not a very satisfying answer. A lot of people don't like my position. I'm not strong enough for Trump supporters. And the fact that I did vote for Trump, which makes me the enemy of progressives as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was just sharing with someone that when I was involved with a hippie commune, we were being guilt tripped to vote for Hillary
Mm,
because they felt that Bernie Sanders was almost like a paid third party candidate to take away votes from the Democrats.
yeah.
And I felt like they were shoving her down our throats. And a lot of us who knew that she was a criminal now, somehow she's as slippery as Trump that she can't get held accountable for all the Epstein stuff, just like him. That we were vindicated, but at that time we were put through this purity test that unless you supported her, you were throwing away your vote, and that you were seen as unwillingly supporting the Republican candidate. Does that happen in the Christian church where they say, well, if Trump becomes problematic because of his personal life or his racist views or his bullying of people and mistreatment of others, um, you should vote for him for greater good, such as not allowing Kamala or Biden's ongoing mishandling of whatever to happen. My other friend from the Anglican faith, he felt bullied the first time around. That Trump was the closest thing to Cyrus the Great, who will be helping the Christians and the Jews
Mhm.
achieve godliness. Did you feel like that during this time around where, you already knew what to expect from Trump, so he couldn't be more unhinged, and what has been your regret since then?
Yeah. Well, there's several comments to be made. Our entire electoral system is designed to avoid splits. It's designed, if you look at how delegates are chosen and how votes are counted and how the election is how the electoral system is designed as a whole to have two parties, to force everyone into one side or the other. And that is, I think, maybe the largest problem that I see with our republic right now, because it just makes things too binary. Progressives rightly complain about how Bernie was sidelined in their situation, and that can happen on the other side as well. It depends also where you are, I think. I'm up here in blue Massachusetts, and so I don't feel the same thing that my sister does living in Waco, Texas. She feels tremendous pressure from her church community and Christian community to do the kind of idolizing of Trump that you talked about. For my part, it's like mostly I try to look at what Trump actually does rather than what he says. His actions have been much better, I think, than some of the unhinged rhetoric that he gives that he has. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but feel free to come back if you'd like.
Well, we often hear that conservatives would say it's about policy, it's not about rhetoric, and he throws a lot of stuff out, and then he somehow puts it back together in a way that it works. But what would be the line that would be too far in moving away from Trump, but from the Christian nationalists and what I consider supremacist Christians like Doug Wilson and people like that? When they start saying women need to shut up, or it's not good to have too many interracial people around, or things like that, like there's a point. We just had an Israeli. I don't know if he's an activist. He's more of a center right, and together we were criticizing Netanyahu and some of the religious radicals from over there, and it was uplifting to have someone that could have a great love for his people and for his nation, and still have that ability to push back on things that
Mhm.
that we don't consider to be appropriate. Um, do you feel comfortable, like if you were to run into someone who was that adamant about things that you can justify anything? You can say, well, the reason we don't want women in leadership is because we're following the Paulinian perspective, or the reason that we don't like immigrants or minorities is because of the statistics. But
Mhm.
where would you say, hey man, that's not the Jesus path. That's not acceptable. We're all made in the image of God. You're using Christianity to justify racism. You're using
Mhm.
Christianity to be heathenistic and um, what's that a term for men? Chauvinist pig. Uh,
Mhm.
do you feel comfortable doing that as a minister, or you have to be more political and careful in the way you confront people?
Well, it all depends on the situation. I mean, when you're in a preaching or teaching situation, when you're in the pulpit, you need to be very careful about what you say and what you denounce. As you know, I have a PhD in politics. I really don't like hearing politics from the pulpit, because I don't think we need to be talking about partisan politics, about public policy for the most part from the pulpit. There are some issues that are really critical, right to life, and some of these other things where I think it's a good idea. But for the most part, I don't want to hear it from the pulpit. On the other hand, I love to talk politics and I love to argue politics and I love to criticize people that I think don't reflect precisely what you're saying. They're not treating everyone as an image bearer of God. someone who bears the image of God. Um, with respect to the extremes that you see among Christian groups, I think the question is always to ask, how big are they? How much influence do they have? Are they um, are they really making an impact, or are they just making noise in their little corner of the United States? When they start impacting the way the rest of us live their lives, then I'm much more concerned and interested than if some nut is off in his corner spouting nonsense.
So even though you have to be cautious as a minister to address some subjects, do you worry or feel empowered to make a statement or to write about someone like Peter Hegseth saying, "We're fighting for Christianity, and there's no greater sacrifice than to give your life for your country," almost like doing a papal bull on salvation through crusades and stuff like that. Like you can
Yeah,
say,
no, I mean you can't. I mean I never served in the military, but my brother did, my father did, my son has, and I'm very proud of their service. But um, the United States is not the kingdom of God, and yes, my son very intentionally went into the infantry, very intentionally um, to be the sort of the point of the spear and put himself in harm's way for the good of the country. But but that's not the ultimate. He recognized that that was not the ultimate as well. Um, so I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but it's always about ranking our loves. Augustine is probably the most influential thinker on my own thinking, and he talked about the that virtue can be defined as rightly ordered loves. God above all, the image bearer of God after that, and then everything else in order below that. So um, we recognize that our God has put leaders in place, sometimes even to punish us, not because we like them, but because they God is chastising us. Um, it is important to recognize and to try to be a good citizen wherever you are, to try and serve your country. But sometimes you have to be willing to die for your country. That's what Bonhoeffer did. He was arrested and later hung for an assassination attempt on Hitler. Even though he was a very loyal German, he believed that that was the right thing for him to do as a German. Um, but that was a very, very extreme thing. I'm very disturbed by so much of the rhetoric against Trump that literally treats him like Hitler, where I do not see a comparison that is justifiable. It really, to my mind, um, sort of normalizes Hitler to talk about Trump as if he didn't actually obey what the courts say. Yes, he goes to court all the time. He has constant lawsuits, but he does not disobey what the court says. He's been willing to, as far as I can tell, he's always trying to stretch the law. There's no question about that. But every decision that courts have made, he's either appealed it or followed it, to my knowledge.
well, the reason that we make such a fuss about whenever things seem dictatorial, fascistic, or totalitarian is because we are worried about the moral clarity and the moral high ground that I think the U.S. has lost throughout the years.
Mm,
And now there's not even any pretending around it. So when we judge other cultures, and this is my biggest challenge, is that traditionalists from all different faiths are making deals with traditionalist neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and xenophobic folks because they want to say Islam is the problem or whatever, liberal atheistic perspectives are the problem. But for you to be able to make that claim, it's almost like you were saying with Augustine about just war. For a
Mhm.
war to be just, there has to be more good that can come out of it than bad. But you have these indiscriminate wars where either the survival of certain groups or the the resources become more important. It's almost like a Machiavellian thing. So then it's really hard to judge other groups because they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to survive. They're trying to gain as much territory or resources as you are. And then you start throwing religion in the mix, and you start
Mhm.
saying that your religion is superior or more pure or more faithful to the Bible. And it's like that has nothing to do with anything, but people are being manipulated through religion. And then they're like, and they switch from religion and they go like family values or
Mhm.
democratic norms, stuff like that. And now even democratic norms are not that important anymore because the goal is what matters most. So how do nations stay faithful to their values, like you were saying? If the founding fathers were, 70% Christian and they brought in a lot of Christian ideas into the mix, how does the church remind people of those values and not allow for people who are opportunists and manipulators to just do whatever they want with it?
Well, my favorite verse about politics is when Jesus said to his disciples, "I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." And I don't know if there's a verse that has been more violated by Christians than that one. Because Christians are typically neither shrewd like serpents nor innocent like doves. They wind up being super naive. They wind up saying uninformed things, not working hard to understand the principles of governance that have existed for thousands of years and how people operate, how things work. So they're naive. They are not shrewd. They don't or they are not innocent as doves. They, as you say, they can compromise with other groups that are radically opposed to the faith. They wind up acting like non-Christians rather than acting like Christians. And oftentimes it's both. It's both. They're not neither shrewd nor innocent. And so yeah, almost any accusation that you wanted to throw against Christians, you would find a significant representation of those people in public. So it's about trying to work through all that to come up with a way to live together, to be able to serve our God above all. That is what matters above all. Even ready to lay down our lives, not to kill, but to be killed if necessary for our faith. Um, so it's a very difficult thing, and a lot of people wander into politics thinking that they have easy answers. I don't see that at all. I've spent a significant portion of my life trying to understand some of these concepts, and there's still a lot that I feel like I don't understand very well at all.
Well, in the last 20 minutes of our interview, I wanted to um, see if you're familiar with a couple of concepts. So,
Mhm.
when you said that you voted for different candidates, were they any of them were on the libertarian spectrum?
I've never voted libertarian. I'm familiar with libertarian views somewhat, and there's many things that I agree with. I agree with a lot of the liberties of libertarianism, but I'm conservative. That believes in conserving those institutions in society that are larger than the individual as well. So no, I've never voted libertarian.
In a recent conversation between Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith,
Hmm.
Dave Smith was defending Pat Buchanan. Are you familiar with that guy?
I am. It's been a while since he's been a significant, has had much impact, but I am familiar with him. Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know what kind of background Dave Smith came from. I know he's Jewish, but it seems like he sat at his dad's lap and they were at the altar of Reagan, Pat Buchanan, um, then listening to what's that guy that became a Mormon? The had a show on Fox News.
Hmm.
Um, he's big
Glenn Beck.
big fan of Glenn Beck, and then the libertarian guy who Ron Paul and
Hmm.
Rand Paul. So
Hmm.
he loves all those guys, and
Hmm.
there are things that are interesting, like when they stand up against the system and things like that. But I know for a fact that Pat Buchanan was very xenophobic
Hmm.
and he was anti-Semitic
Hmm.
because he would say, how is it that there's three Jewish Supreme Court justices? There's too much representation from the Jewish side, and he would never say that about Catholics
Yeah, no.
because right now we have like four Catholics,
Right.
and then he was obsessed with immigration, and he
Hmm.
felt that the Hispanics were problematic or whatever. And then you go
Hmm.
down the line with Glenn Beck and all these other guys. So when you start incorporating those type of ideas that they're utopian in one sense, where they say the U.S. should not be involved in other people's wars and they shouldn't give aid or anything like that,
Hmm.
then it becomes this nativistic type of patriotism. So
Yeah.
what would be the difference between the patriotism that you aspire to with this nativistic, almost like trying to stay away from anything that does not benefit the US when things are so complicated? Knowing politics, um, how do you balance that out? Whereas both the foreign entanglements are not so much they run us dry financially, but then there's also this sense of making America great or America first, which I think is still very popular, even though Trump's leadership is kind of waning.
Yeah. Well, I think a country does have a responsibility to take care of its own citizens first. Not that they don't have interests in helping the rest of the world, but just like a, a husband or a wife has to have uh, give priority to their own family and taking care of their family before they help everybody else. I think it's much like that with the country. Um, we have been extremely generous in bringing people into our country. I think that's one of the things that makes the United States unique. It's built around ideas, not around ethnicities or existing people groups. We are not defined by those kinds of things, but by the ideas that we uphold. And as I say, we've often fallen short on those. But I think immigration has to be based on how we can bring people in to join us in this great project that we've been trying to bring about for 250 years. If and and so the question is how many and how fast do we bring others in, and are they committed to the same ideas that have made the United States the United States? I'm concerned when we bring in immigrants that are hostile to what this country is about, that is literally trying to overturn the country from one direction or another, from one political leaning or another. Um, so yeah, I don't know if those answer your questions. They're very broad topics, but those are some broad principles.
Have you come across anybody talking about white insurance policy.
No, I don't know what that means.
So I was shocked to hear from someone to say that that since white like representation in the US is like becoming less because of changing populations.
Hmm.
And I guess they're looking at statistics, by 2050, Hispanics are going to be a large majority of the population.
Hmm.
They were having this type of panic attack or existential crisis that there needed to be almost like white only cities and white only spaces to preserve white culture.
Hmm.
And it appeared to me very fragile and kind of like a snowflake kind of mentality where if European culture is that great and that powerful, then it permeates all over the world and it has an impact. And if people from different shades or cultural backgrounds, like you're saying, they integrate or incorporate those values, then it's a positive outcome. But now there's this kind of rejection of that even being possible. And I know a lot of it has to do with what they see happening in Europe. Uh, but
Yeah.
it boggles the mind that they start talking about like a white homeland in the US when there's I think about 30 different white homelands in Europe that people can easily move to. So it's
Mhm.
almost like what happened in South Africa where when they opened it up to all races, uh, some towns decided to go create their own white-only communities. Um, how would you respond as a Christian? And again, I know that you mentioned that it's about an idea, it's not about a specific ethnic group. As a Christian, how would you counter someone who would have such a narrow perspective on what European culture is and how to preserve it?
Right. I don't think I would not support that, obviously. Uh, on the other hand, I would ask how big are those groups? If they want to go form their own um, closed community somewhere, tiny closed community, maybe that's allowable as long as it doesn't, as long as I don't know. There's possibility that they might be able to do something like that in some close place. I don't agree with it, but I think it's loathsome. But maybe there's a way that they could go do that somewhere. From my perspective, um, the right kind of immigration is actually something I welcome. As a Christian, I welcome um, immigrants from some countries because um, they are strong Christians and they hold strong family values and these kinds of things. The right kind of immigration, I think, it is it plays right into that. And some of the immigrants that I have known um, are exemplary Americans. They are the best of what America's aspired to be, um, and we see them in our government. Even Marco Rubio's from Cuba, and if I'm not mistaken, and he's an exemplary man. So. Um, with respect to Europe, I think there's a genuine concern there. By the end of this century, at the latest, given current population growth, Europe will be Muslim, uh, just by pure population growth. I think that's a concern because Islam is, for the most part, hostile to Christianity, does not play well with any other religion, and has advanced almost always through very aggressive, often very violent tactics. So um, that's a concern. That's a worry about that I have about Europe. Europe is barely Christian anymore, but I think um, it I don't want to see it become Islamic either.
But in the marketplace of ideas, why is Islam more attractive to even whites in America? And here in Houston, we have a giant Latino Muslim community of converts.
Really? That's great.
And what I see is that the Catholic Church has failed them, the
Mm-hmm.
Protestant evangelical community has failed them. They don't have the amount of community, the amount of resources, also the victimhood. I think that if Americans act like we're all the same, but we're not, we're treated differently because of our skin color or because of our culture, another group is going to come and say, well, we're victims in the Middle East because of foreign intervention. We can join in the victimhood as servants of God, till the end of time. So is I always see, Native Americans, like my friend like to call them, not indigenous people, but Americans who founded and created the colonies, as always putting the blame out to everybody else. When their kids go wild, they always say, "Is the culture that corrupted them?" And they don't take responsibility
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
raising. So, what do you think if you were competing for the next generation? How do Christians need to uh, be a light or an alternative as compared to the Muslim community? And then also, do you have any nuance where if we say Muslims are very violent and conquest driven, well, Christians were very violent and conquest driven in the medieval times. Some people now are going back and saying that the Jews are doing that now, or they did it during the conquest of Canaan. So, what are do you think that Christianity is modern Christianity is connected to democracy and those values? And can Muslims also incorporate those values so it's more of a amicable relationship between the different faiths?
Yeah. Um, there's no question that uh, republicanism, I don't mean the party, but the idea of a republic and a rights-driven republic came out of Christianity. There are sort of examples that are held up in other places in the world, but I don't find them very compelling. Um, it's a question as to whether Islam can have a genuinely free society or not. The societies that have been Muslim, that have been um, free societies, have managed to keep those two things very much apart. In other words, they are not uh, integrating any fundamental Islamic values into the way that they run the state. I don't see what we call separation of church and state. I don't see that in Islamic countries where there is a genuine separation. It's more like the French laïcité, where it's a complete rejection of all religious ideas. I don't see like they do in the United States where people are trying to bring their faith in, but maintaining freedom of towards other religions, other ideas, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, that kind of thing. So if something happens within Islam that that develops um, a theology of free societies, then I'll be more hopeful than I am right now. Uh, yes, there has been a aggressive Christianity in the past, but if you dig down into the stories, there's a lot of history that's um, it's being re-examined. Rodney Stark has written lots of books about the Crusades and the myths that it went into those, the distorted impression, distorted versions of history that have been passed down through uh, through sort of an anti-Christian liberalism that has existed in some corners. Um, It's yeah, we need to find a way to live together and to allow everyone to follow their conscience unless it, actually hurts other people's conscience, and find a way to live together. And it's a hard process. It's messy. It's not stable. It requires a lot of work. It's much easier to be an absolutist in any position. It's much easier in one sense to force your ideas onto other people. But it's the only way I see for us to get together and to live together until Jesus comes back.
And by Jesus saying, "My kingdom is not of this world," and the Apostle Paul saying, "Don't get married because the second coming is on its way." Do you see the Jesus movement as almost like an escapist, kind of separatist group from the Roman Empire and the Jewish kingdom that was under Roman occupation? Or do you see them as, like you were saying, very subtle, good citizens who were trying to change people's hearts versus getting too tangled up in political power?
Yeah, when Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world," he meant that his authority didn't come from any political realm. It is clear that he was in fact making claims about his own being chosen by God, but he did not force that on other people. And so that example of being willing to die, he said when he died, look, I could call 12 legions of angels to deliver me from this, but he chose to die. Um, he set an example that painfully slowly changed all of human history, and reset the way the world works. So yeah, he didn't tell Christian soldiers to leave the army. He didn't tell political figures to drop out of politics, but he made claims on their allegiances, on the way they made decisions. And over hundreds and now thousands of years, that's changed the world. It has changed the way we treat one another, in ways that most of us don't even appreciate, because the influence has been so subtle and so gradual that it's transformed our lives. Yeah, the Rome Christians made great soldiers. They made great political figures. They made faithful um, citizens of the realm, until Caesar asked them to do something that contradicted the claims of Christ, and then they were willing to die for it. They didn't seek that out, but that's what happened. Um, so yeah, we need to remember that story, that influence, and that the value. You've probably heard of Tom Holland's book Dominion, and I think it's hugely important. He's a historian that started off with the assumption that things had always been like they are, that people always valued human life, but he became convinced that, after studying that Christianity, and based on Judaism, of course, first, had transformed, that the cross of Christ and what that represented over hundreds of years, serving those at the bottom, valuing those at the bottom, changed the way the world worked. And that's his understanding of dominion, not one that dominates other people, but your ideas and your values are so transformed that you're willing to take into consideration people that had never been valued before, the poor, the marginalized, those who are at the bottom.
We want to thank you for your time, but before we go, can you give us your blog and how do people can see what you have put out there in the internet?
Yeah, I'm moving more and more into uh, writing on biblical symbolism, particularly in the Old Testament, what Christians call the Old Testament, but also in what we call the New Testament as well. And my Substack is called "Seeing the Keystone: Notes on Symbolism in the Bible." If you look that up in Substack, "Seeing the Keystone," your listeners can find it. I'm trying to trying to see the recapture some of these things that have been lost in the last few centuries since the scientific revolution. We've lost the ability to kind of look at the world in a symbolic way. Although the advantages of the scientific revolution are huge, we've also lost some things as well. So, yeah, seeing the keystone on is the name of my Substack.
Wonderful. And I'll look through your different articles and we can do a part two going through the biblical symbolism that you're mentioning. Again, we want to thank you for being with us. And if our audience can look up Kelly Maden and his Substack for more information that I think we've lost a lot of biblical literacy. So the work
Yeah.
that you're doing is very important. Thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Take care.